Don't sit down when your sister is standing. Even through the noise of the crowded bus during rush hour at dusk, my mother's voice pierced my ears and my heart like a sharpened blade. Just moments before she spoke, I had felt a faint but unfamiliar tightness in my pregnant belly. I told myself it was only fatigue. We were on our way home from a relative's funeral, and my body felt unbearably heavy, my abdomen aching in a way I'd never experienced before. Deep down, though, an undeniable intuition had begun to quietly form. This might be the beginning of labor. The next moment, my mother's bony hand seized my arm with surprising strength and yanked me up from my seat. Staggering backward, I nearly lost my balance under the sudden assault. 9 months pregnant, I was forced to stand so that my healthy younger sister could sit in my place. It was an act that trampled on my goodwill at its core. Worse, it showed a complete disregard for my baby's safety. An unforgivable insult. My sister brushed past me as I staggered, sitting down as if nothing had happened, while my mother fixed me with a cold, accusing glare. My sister didn't even glance in my direction. She lowered herself into the seat as though it had been reserved for her all along, sinking into it without the slightest hesitation. Almost immediately, her eyes dropped to the glowing screen of her smartphone, disappearing into that small, curated world. The vibrant scroll of her social media feed flickered emptily at the edge of my vision, a cruel contrast to the reality in front of me. Her eyes held not the warmth of a mother looking at her daughter, but the cold, appraising look one gives to a possession that refuses to obey. I could feel the other passengers stealing glances at us. Pity, curiosity, contempt. A mixture of those emotions hung in the air like a suffocating mist. This was my family. I am Kelly Manning, 34 years old. I've built a solid career as a project manager at a major IT company. My husband, James, is a wonderful man, my best supporter and the person I love most. At that moment, he was on the other side of the world on his last long business trip before our baby's birth. Our future should have been filled with hope, if only it weren't for those two. The pain lingering on my arm where my mother had grabbed me, and the dull ache in my abdomen were the final triggers. I heard it then. Clearly, the sound of the invisible chains called filial duty, which had bound me for months, no, years, snapping apart. I slowly lifted my head and met my mother's eyes. Then, in the calmest yet iciest voice I could muster, I stated clearly, "All right, fine. Then have your capable daughter pay for the renovation and for everything else." My words landed like a quiet bomb. The blood drained from my mother's face, and my younger sister, Nicole, looked up from her phone in shock. Without anyone's help, I pressed the stop button for the next station, stood up, and got off the bus in silence. The bus roared away, leaving behind a cloud of exhaust. I watched its taillights fade into the distance. Sitting alone on the bench at the bus stop, I could feel the adrenaline ebbing from my body, replaced by a cold, steady anger and a firm resolve. Why hadn't I done this sooner? This humiliating episode was only the tip of the iceberg. Lately, what had been mentally pushing me to the brink was the issue of renovating my parents' house. Somehow, I had ended up footing the entire astronomical bill, a trap carefully laid by my mother's words. You'll understand soon enough, since you're about to become a mother too. Parents give everything for their children. We've done everything we could for you. Now it's your turn to give back to the family. Nicole has her hands full with her own life, so you're the only one we can rely on. At the time, I hadn't done any major acts of filial piety, so I thought helping out wasn't such a bad idea. Nicole had been an aspiring model, which in reality meant she'd been unemployed for years. Within our family, her opinions had always carried more weight than anyone else's. Our phone conversation just a few days earlier was no different. Nicole had suddenly decided she didn't like the wallpaper chosen for the renovation. It had already been ordered and was in the process of being carefully installed by the craftsman. She wants a brighter champagne gold. Nicole has amazing taste, so I'm sure it'll make the whole house more glamorous. Call the contractors right away and have them change it. Mom, the wallpaper is almost completely up. If we change it now, the extra costs will be enormous. Besides, the order is already... My practical objection was cut off by her sharp, scolding tone. You're always talking about money. You earn plenty, so what's the big deal? You're always nitpicking and ruining the family's happiness. Just make the call. Nicole's disappointed. On the other end of the abruptly disconnected call was a spoiled family that didn't care in the slightest about my circumstances or financial burden. I stood there, staring at the screen of my smartphone, unable to move for a long moment. Why had I kept accepting this kind of unreasonable treatment? Right after that call, I went outside to water the herbs in my garden, hoping to clear my head. That's when I ran into Mrs. Smith, my neighbor. She had lost her husband years ago and lived alone in that house. "Kelly, how are you feeling? You look a little pale." The gentle smile on Mrs. Smith's wrinkled face softened the tension that had been tightening in my chest. "Seeing you like this reminds me of when my daughter was pregnant. It's a tough time, so you really mustn't overdo it, especially with a family as lively as yours. Don't worry too much about what's around you. Focus on your body and the little one inside you. That's the most important thing." Her words carried the quiet wisdom of an older woman and a deep sympathetic understanding of my situation. The kindness of someone unrelated by blood had never struck my heart so profoundly before. I fought back the tears that welled up and managed only a faint wavering smile in return. Enough. I was utterly exhausted. A strange sensation welled up inside me, a mixture of liberating relief and the fear of the storm that was surely about to begin. The contractions were becoming more frequent. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called a taxi. When I got home, I went straight to my study. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone. Over the past several years, my mother and Nicole's demands had only escalated. As a high-earning project manager, I had been treated like their personal ATM, constantly funding their endless wants. But that ended now. The first call was to the renovation company. "This is Kelly Manning. Regarding the renovation of my parents' house, I want to immediately stop all payments from my side. I will not be covering any additional costs. From now on, please direct all invoices to the actual contract holders, my parents." I could hear the brief moment of stunned silence from the person on the other end. They had likely been counting on my regular payments to purchase materials and hire workers, investing large sums up front. Once I stopped paying, they would act quickly to halt construction to avoid further losses. That was the logical business decision. The next call was to the bank. "Please stop all automatic withdrawals." Family credit cards for my mother and sister, Nicole's cell phone bill, household utilities for my parents' home. One by one, I went through the countless withdrawal items I had been paying as a matter of course, instructing the operator to stop each of them. I could hear the confusion creeping into the operator's voice as the list went on. It took less than 30 minutes to end it all. By tomorrow, the renovation work would grind to a complete halt. And soon, the invoices for already ordered materials and cancellation fees for the craftsmen would land squarely on my parents' doorstep. As soon as I hung up the phone, a wave of exhaustion hit me. And in that moment, my real life finally began. Several hours had passed since that humiliating scene on the bus. After making all the calls, the house fell silent. The stillness before a storm. I sank deep into the sofa, my mind swirling with thoughts of what might happen next. Inside me, doubt over whether I had done the right thing clashed fiercely with the certainty that this was nothing more than their rightful consequence. It was then, as the last light of sunset streamed diagonally through the living room, that a sharp, stabbing pain shot through my abdomen, unlike anything I had ever felt before. The pain surged like a wave and then receded. I gasped, a small cry escaping my lips. No way, there were still 2 weeks until my due date. But there was no mistaking it. Labor had begun. A cold bead of sweat slid down my temple as the reality set in. What should I do first? Call the hospital, check my hospital bag, and then call my mother. Yes, my mother. Despite everything that had happened on the bus earlier, in this life or death situation, I had no choice but to rely on family. James was far away. I couldn't face this alone. That fragile, dependent part of me still remained. With trembling fingers, I pressed her number on speed dial. Hello, Mom? Kelly, what is it at this hour? Is this your apology for earlier? Her voice on the other end was sharp and irritable, laced with thorns. She clearly hadn't discovered the payment cancellations yet. Gritting my teeth, I waited for the next contraction to subside before forcing the words out. I'm in labor. I need you to take me to the hospital. I can't do this alone. There was a brief silence. Surely, now, she would grasp the gravity of the situation. This was her daughter, her flesh and blood, about to give birth. But that fragile hope was shattered by her sighing, utterly exasperated response. What, labor? Don't be dramatic. It's probably just false contractions. First babies never come that fast. And what was that attitude on the bus earlier? If you just listened to me, none of this would have happened. Do you know how hurt Nicole was? I had to spend ages comforting her afterward. Nicole? Hurt? After being given a seat? My mother completely ignored the fact that she had violently dragged her pregnant daughter out of her seat and instead condemned my small act of resistance as if it were the true offense. That realization pierced my heart like an icy blade. So that's how it is. To her, my life being at risk mattered less than keeping Nicole in a good mood. I see. All right. That was all I said before hanging up. I no longer had the energy to plead, nor even the strength to be angry. All that remained was a crushing sense of loneliness and a cold resolve rising from the depths of my soul. I had been foolish to think I could rely on these people. The contractions were growing steadily closer together. 5 minutes apart, perhaps. I braced myself against the wall and headed toward the front door. If I wanted to get to the hospital, I would have to call a taxi myself. But the moment my hand touched the doorknob, a searing wave of pain ripped through my entire body. My vision flashed white. I collapsed on the floor, the chill of the hardwood seeping into my sweat-dampened cheek. My consciousness began to fade. Through the haze, I realized I hadn't even unlocked the front door. This is bad. No one will be able to get in. Stay with me. A voice cut through the fog. When I forced my eyes open, I saw a familiar face peering down at me in alarm. Mrs. Smith, my neighbor. Your front door was slightly ajar. I heard a noise and got worried, and oh my goodness, your water's broken. You're in labor. Her usual calm expression was tinged with panic, but she remained astonishingly composed. With swift, practiced movements, she called 911 and relayed the situation clearly to the dispatcher. 34 years old. First pregnancy, 38 weeks, water's broken, contractions 5 minutes apart. The entire time, she held my hand tightly, repeating in a steady whisper, "It's okay, Kelly. You're not alone. I'm right here with you." That warmth broke through the dam I had built inside me. In the moment of deepest despair, abandoned by my own blood, it was my neighbor, unrelated by blood, who saved me. As the sound of approaching sirens drew closer, I couldn't help but think, what does family really mean? The birth itself was intense, almost overwhelming. When Mrs. Smith learned that James wouldn't make it in time, she stayed with me without hesitation, wiping the sweat from my forehead, rubbing my back, holding my hand. Like a real mother would. That's it, Kelly. You're doing so well. Don't forget to breathe. You're almost there. You'll see your baby soon. Her steady encouragement was the thread that kept my slipping consciousness tethered to the world. And then, after more than 10 long hours of labor, the room filled with the sound of my baby's first cry. In my arms lay a tiny, warm, and utterly precious little girl. My daughter. Exhausted, I tapped my phone screen and sent a picture of her to James. "She's here, your daughter." Moments later, despite the time difference, a video call came through. On the screen, James's face crumpled as tears streamed down. "Oh, Kelly. You did it. You really did it. I'm so sorry. So sorry I couldn't be there with you. I'm coming home. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow, no matter what." "Yes, I'll be waiting for you," I whispered through tears. I would tell him everything when he returned. For now, I just wanted to share this joy with him. His tears eased something in my heart, and I made a promise to myself. I would protect this tiny life in my arms, no matter what. From them. That night, as I sat in the quiet hospital room cradling my daughter, my phone suddenly began to vibrate violently. The screen displayed one word: Mother. She must have finally discovered that the renovation had been completely halted. I answered the call once, placing it on speaker. Mrs. Smith sat beside me with my permission as a witness. "Kelly, what have you done? The house is a mess. The contractors aren't coming. The wallpaper's half torn off. What's going on?" It wasn't the voice of a mother celebrating her grandchild's birth. It was the hysterical shriek of someone furious that her flow of money had been cut off. I said nothing, just gazed at my daughter's peaceful sleeping face. After a few moments, my mother screamed, "Are you listening? How dare you stay silent? Nicole is so shocked she's bedridden now. Why do you always think only of yourself? Why must you keep hurting your sister? I calmly ended the call. Mrs. Smith gently placed a hand on my shoulder. I nodded, then blocked both my mother's and Nicole's numbers without hesitation. And then I deleted them from my contacts. This was the ritual that marked the beginning of my new life. The next day, James rushed straight from the airport with his suitcase still in hand. When he held our newborn daughter in his arms for the first time, tears spilled down his face in great glistening drops. Were his tears of regret for not making it in time, or tears of pure joy? By then, it didn't matter anymore. The only thing that truly mattered was this. From that day on, we were a family of 3. At the serviced apartment we had rented near the hospital, I told him everything. The humiliation on the bus, the early signs of labor, my mother's cold, cutting words when I called for help, and the quiet, life-saving kindness of Mrs. Smith in my moment of despair. As James listened silently, the expression on his face slowly drained away. When I finished, he pulled me into his arms, strongly, yet with the tenderness one uses to hold something fragile. "I'm so sorry, Kelly. I wasn't there while you were going through hell. I can't forgive myself for that." His voice trembled with quiet fury. "But there's one thing I can say with absolute certainty. What you did was 100% right. In fact, it should have happened a long time ago. Those people, they're not family, they're poison. And I swear to you, I'll protect you and our daughter. I'll never let you go through anything like that again." His words were the strongest vow I had ever heard. That very day, we began making concrete plans for our new life. First, we would find a new home, somewhere my mother and Nicole didn't know. Then I would change my phone number. Finally, we would hire a top lawyer to begin legal procedures. The following afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Mrs. Smith stood there with a plate holding a homemade quiche and her warm, familiar smile. "Kelly, how are you feeling? I also couldn't resist coming to see that little princess of yours." "Mrs. Smith, please come in. She just woke up," I said, ushering her inside. James stood from the sofa where he had been holding our daughter. He had been away on so many long business trips overseas that he had never actually met Mrs. Smith in person. Watching the woman who had saved my life meet my husband for the first time made something tighten gently in my chest. James carefully laid our daughter in the bassinet and walked straight over to her. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm James, Kelly's husband. She's told me all about you. You must be Mrs. Smith." His voice shook slightly with gratitude and respect that he couldn't suppress. Mrs. Smith widened her eyes in mild surprise, then quickly returned to her gentle expression. "Yes, that's me. And you're James. Kelly's told me plenty about you too, the brilliant businessman flying all over the world." At Mrs. Smith's words, James gave a small, bashful smile. "My wife told me everything. When I wasn't here, you saved her. You saved both her and our child. The thought of what could have happened terrifies me. No words could ever express my gratitude. Truly, thank you." With those words, he bowed his head. Mrs. Smith's face softened with maternal warmth as she gently touched his arm. "Raise your head, James. I only did what anyone should do, as a neighbor and as a fellow human being. Besides, being there to witness the birth of such a beautiful baby was a gift to me. I should be the one thanking you for letting me share in your happiness." When James started to speak again with a hesitant, "But," she gently continued, "I can imagine how hard it must have been for you, hearing the news from so far away and not being able to do anything. But from now on, you'll be here to protect Kelly and your daughter. That's what matters. Still, if it's all right, I'd love to see this little one from time to time. I already feel like a grandmother." Her warm words made James smile softly. "Of course. Please consider yourself part of our family. No, as Mia's other grandmother." I watched the scene quietly from a few steps away. A woman with no blood ties and no obligations loved my husband and my daughter so genuinely. That truth slowly melted the frozen places inside my heart. Before I realized it, warm tears were streaming down my cheeks. They weren't tears of loneliness or despair. James, Mrs. Smith, and the little life in my arms, this was my true family. That certainty gave me strength. Of course, my mother wasn't going to stay silent. Once she realized my phone number was no longer working, she found a new target. James's phone. She must have heard somewhere that he'd returned from his trip. James glanced at me, then answered the call on speakerphone. The voice that came through was syrupy sweet, a complete contrast to her previous hysterics. "James, thank goodness I reached you. Kelly's being so cruel, she's cut us off completely. She won't even let us see our grandchild. Please talk some sense into her. We're family. Let's put all this behind us." James's voice turned cold as ice. "Mother, while Kelly was in labor, suffering alone, where were you? What were you doing? I know everything now. This is over. Do not ever contact our family again." He hung up before she could reply. Almost immediately, a message popped up on social media from Nicole. "Mom's about to collapse because of you. You're the worst. The house is a disaster and we're getting weird letters from the contractors. This is all your fault." We both sighed deeply at the childish threats and blame shifting. A few days later, I left Mia in Mrs. Smith's care and walked alone to the law office, my hand firm as I knocked on the door. The woman who introduced herself as Hillary Baker, a sharp, intelligent-looking attorney, listened to my story with a calm but empathetic gaze. "That's awful. This is a textbook case of financial abuse and psychological control. None of this is your fault. You've endured far too much. Do you have any evidence?" I showed her everything I had collected over the years. Screenshots of my mother's callous messages, the call logs to James, Mrs. Smith's statement from the emergency incident, and the extensive payment records I had kept for the renovation costs. "This is more than enough. We can handle this very effectively. First, we'll send a certified letter formally prohibiting any further contact. If the harassment continues, we'll immediately petition the court for a restraining order. Your only focus now should be on your safety and your child's well-being. Leave the rest to me." Her professional, unwavering words filled me with more courage than I could have imagined. As expected, my mother and Nicole ignored the warning from the lawyer. One weekend, after a viewing for our new apartment, the intercom at the entrance rang loudly. On the monitor, I saw my mother's face contorted with anger and desperation, and beside her, Nicole crying like a child. "Kelly, open the door. We need to talk. How dare you send a lawyer against your own parents?" "Please, Kelly. We keep getting demand letters from the contractors every day. I don't know what to do. This isn't my fault." Following my lawyer's instructions, I didn't respond at all. I simply pressed the record button, capturing their entire meltdown on video. That footage became decisive evidence of their erratic behavior. The legal process unfolded with surprising quietness and speed. The court issued a formal restraining order against my mother and Nicole. They were legally prohibited from coming within 600 feet of me or my family. The enormous unpaid renovation bills were, of course, sent directly to my parents and Nicole, who had no means to pay. They were forced to sell their house, once a proud suburban symbol of their vanity, and move into a small old apartment on the opposite side of town. I later heard this from Mrs. Smith. Rumors spread quickly among relatives and old acquaintances. They made Kelly pay for the entire renovation. She abandoned her daughter while she was in labor. That gifted Nicole has actually never worked a day in her life. The family's carefully crafted facade collapsed. Their reputation, especially my mother's precious social image, shattered completely. Nicole's golden child illusion crumbled, and the warped values they had lived by disintegrated from the ground up. 5 years have passed since then. Mrs. Smith, the woman who became my savior that day, is now an irreplaceable part of our lives. To Mia, she is Grandma Dorothy. She never misses Mia's birthdays, arriving each year with a big homemade cake. Every Christmas, she gifts her a lovingly hand-knitted sweater. The sweet smell of freshly baked cookies always fills her kitchen, and Mia adores it. Though there's no blood relation, she is Mia's true grandmother, and to me, she's like a second mother. Warm, kind, and steadfast. I haven't seen my mother and Nicole since that day. I don't know where they are now, and I have no desire to find out. What fills my heart now is not hatred or anger, but quiet, unshakable peace. It's not that I've forgiven them. They've simply become irrelevant, no longer a part of my life. I cut those hateful chains with my own hands, and I protected what truly mattered. The tiny life I once cradled now tugs at my hand, racing toward a brilliant future. Sometimes, Mia will suddenly ask me a question. "Where's your mommy, Mama?" Once, that innocent question might have hurt. But now I simply smile gently, pull her into my arms, and say, "She's far away, sweetheart, But you have Grandma Dorothy, who always bakes you delicious cookies. And you have a mommy and daddy who love you more than anything in the world. That's more than enough love for one little girl. Mia nods thoughtfully, then runs off to join her friends. As I watch her small back disappear into the group, I tilt my head up toward the sky. A clear blue sky stretches endlessly above,